Oh, hello, good evening. My name is Paul Warrant. I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 1 and a member of Brookline by Design, which is sponsoring this evening's rapid warrant review. I'd like to quickly thank all of our panelists for taking time out of their very busy schedules getting prepared for town meeting to help us review the articles contained in this town meeting warrant. I'd also like to congratulate and welcome each of our newest town meeting members that are attending tonight's festivities at the warrant review. This session has been designed specifically with you in mind. Kate Soba, who is my colleague in Precinct 1, will be moderating this evening's session. Kate is a professor of law over at Boston University, and she is a long-time town meeting member. We don't know exactly how long, but it's been a long time. And a quick reminder that this session is being recorded. We do expect to share the recording. And the opinions expressed by the attendees tonight on our panel are their own and are not the opinions of Brookline by Design. So at this time, Kate, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Welcome to this very rapid warrant overview. Please know that as we give 2 to 3 minutes to a warrant article, that its drafters, the town departments, the advisory committee, the select board, and often other committees have given this single article many hours of their time. Each of today's speakers has given parts of the warrant a deep dive coming into this week, and they will endeavor to distill it down to nuggets, inevitably shortchanging the complexity in favor of time savings. We are today going to give some of the media warrants a bit more time here, but you should consider going to the League of Women Voter warrant review, your precinct warrant review, paying attention to the discussions on the TMMA listserv as we get closer and people are really talking about warrant articles as good sources. Please seek multiple sources of information and make your own decisions about how to vote. During this webinar, please put questions in the chat and we'll try to answer them in follow-up tonight or tomorrow in order to stay on track with time here. Panelists, the timekeeping is going to be brutal. I'm going to be trying to imitate Sandy Gatsby here. Once you're out of time, please plan to let people know where they can find more information, and I will announce the next speaker. And first up, I am going to talk about warrant articles 1 to 5 in a group. These are mostly annual placeholders. Warrant Article 1 is mandated in our bylaws. It's a kind of cringy, a little bit tradition of silliness that you do not need to prepare for. Warrant Article 2 is to deal with any open collective bargaining issues that are not school related. There's usually nothing here, but this year there's an AFSCME memorandum of understanding. You can read about it in the combined reports. That union covers town departments that are not police and fire. Teachers aren't ever in this warrant Article 2 provision. Their collective bargaining agreements are dealt with in the school budget, which is part of warrant Article 8, not subject to town meeting review. Warrant Article 3 is mandated by state law that lets the town deal in the most advantageous way with any bank fees. Warrant Article 4 is mandated in the town bylaw, which is that at the end of the year, we report on unpaid balances for any special appropriations we made the last year. By state law, those unpaid monies go into free cash. Here we could also rescind any bond authorizations, but there are none to rescind. And warrant Article 5, the final placeholder, is to cover unpaid bills, and there are none. Let me turn it over to you, Paul, for 1 minute on warrant Article 6.
1 minute. Warrant Article 6 is an annual warrant article to increase state mandated local property tax exemptions to help make Brookline more affordable for certain classes of individuals, including the elderly, the blind, and disabled veterans. The article has been continually approved by town meetings since 1989. The budget impact of approving Article 6 is an increase of approximately $44,000 funded from the tax abatement overlay reserve account. Both the select board and the advisory committee have unanimously recommended positive action, which means voting yes to you new town meeting members on Article 6. Thank you.
Thank you. Bernard, you have 2 minutes on warrant Article 7.
Speak fast. Okay, the new 9th grade academy at Brookline High School has a larger and different footprint than the building that previously occupied the site. So among the consequences of this change are the need to adjust the many rights that residents of two buildings, 1921 Brington Road and 25 Brington Road, enjoyed, including the right to come over and go from their properties over easements granted by the former owner of the high school site, new high school site. The easements in Warrant Article 7 affirm and protect the existing rights of the town and of residents of 1921 Brington Road and 25 Brington Road that are buildings immediately west of the new high school building. And the warrant articles protect these rights by the following. First, an easement from the condominium, which is at 1921 Brington Road, to the town, giving the town the right to enter onto their property to use and maintain certain infrastructure. Secondly, an easement granted by the town to the condominium at 1921 Brington to allow condominium residents to travel over a portion of the high school building service road so that they can access 3 parking spaces. And finally, an easement granted by the town to 25 Brington Road, allowing residents access to the rear of their property over the school's service road. So these easements are interest in real estate that must be signed by the select board, but authorized by town meeting under state law, which is why they are before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. Perfect. And warrant Article 8, probably the most time-consuming warrant article in the spring warrant is the budget. And we have devoted 14 minutes to it tonight. First to Alok Samani and then Carla Benka for the CIP. So
hi, Kate, thank you.
Between you, Alok, however quickly you can help people with this.
I will go as quick as I can. As Kate mentioned, I will be covering the operating budget. The first thing to note is that our fiscal year is July 1st through June 30th. Next, we do use a shorthand. So when you see fiscal year FY23 to denote the fiscal year, that means July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. Another thing to understand is that the process starts with a long-range plan. It actually starts with an auditor's report that's delivered October, November on our financial statements. And then it's translated into a long-range plan that is prepared in December. Highly recommend both. They're available on the town website. The budget that is submitted to town meeting for your review and approval is the product of hours and hours of work by many, many competent people that we have working for us in the town administration, as well as all the volunteers on the select board, the advisory committee, and the other boards and commissions. And it also does reflect public input. So please note also that the town splits available revenue 60-40 between the schools and the town. And this is what is commonly referred to as a school-town partnership. The school committee then goes on to prepare the school budget on that basis, and the town administrator separately prepares the town budget. And what is presented in Warrant Article 8 is the combined budget. The total budget this year that you'll be reviewing at town meeting is $382.7 million. And that represents a 4.3% increase over fiscal year 22. Of this, the town budget is $257.9 million, which is an almost 5% increase over last year. And the school budget is $124.8 million, and that's a 3.1% increase over fiscal year 22. This year, like many years before, there is a structural gap between the revenue the town raises and the amount of money we do spend. So for example, the school budget has, although it may look balanced this year, there is a $3 million gap, and that gap is funded by one-time pandemic-related funds that may or may not be available into the future. With respect to revenue, Brookline has several sources. We have property tax, local fees, state aid, and as mentioned, this year we have some one-time money from the federal government that's associated with the pandemic. Money from the federal government is absolutely warmly welcomed, but when we use one-time money to commit to expenses that might recur year over year, there is a potential impact to the structural gap between revenue and expense. There is a state law that limits the annual increase in property tax to 2.5%. So when you hear the word override, that is a suggestion that we put on the ballot, a request to the voters to increase property taxes by more than 2.5% as allowed by law. And we use those funds to address the structural gap. Expenses. The town has expenses we are obligated to pay, things such as salaries, benefits, and our debt service. We also have expenses that we self-fund. So for example, the water and sewer, the golf course, and our parks are self-funded by revenue they generate. And we also have expenses that lead to services and improvements that benefit us community-wide. I think what's important to keep in mind is that fully 75% of our operating budget is salaries and benefits, benefits being health insurance and pension obligations. Another 11% is debt service. These three items, salaries, benefits, and debt service, account for 84% of our operating budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Wow.
Okay, I am going to give an overview of the CIP, which is the Capital Improvements Program of the town. By way of background, there are two types of capital improvement projects. Some are the so-called pay-as-you-go, and others are bonded generally for a period of 10 years. There's a broad definition of a capital project that Brookline uses. It's one that improves or adds to the town's infrastructure, has a substantial useful life, and costs $25,000 or more. The criteria used for prioritization includes projects that eliminate a hazard to public health and safety, reduces or stabilizes operating costs, prolongs the functional life of a capital asset of the town by 5 or more years, or prevents a substantial reduction in an existing standard of service. Some capital projects are funded on a regular schedule, like parks and playground renovations, or fire department vehicles, roof repair and maintenance, and street and sidewalk rehab. One final note is the capital improvement program should not be confused with capital outlay, which is a line item in the operating budgets of numerous departments. That money is generally used for purchasing cars, DPW vehicles like snowplows or trucks or tractors, computers for offices, etc. The recommendations for the fiscal 2023 CIP total $24,480,653. And the largest amount is for the collective projects representing infrastructure at $12.2 million, and the smallest is for a new fire engine for $700,000. Also within that $24.4 million number is $5.7 million for water and sewer improvements, which is, Alok just mentioned, is financed through a separate entity, the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund in this case, and all of the projects for those improvements are bonded. There are two projects on the horizon. Both will need a successful vote at the polls to proceed. One is the renovation of our fire stations at approximately $60 million, and the other is for the renovation and expansion of the Pierce School, which I think is totally estimated to currently estimated to be $205 million, give or take. A couple of comments. The street and sidewalk rehab continues to be underfunded. We should be spending $5 million a year, but instead we're spending about $1.88 million, plus $960,000 that comes from the state, but can only be used on certain streets. The lack of funds in the operating budget leads to deferring necessary maintenance and repair in town and school buildings. The situation with school buildings is of particular concern since there is now a backlog of approximately $17 million worth of work that needs to be done. And not attending to necessary repair and maintenance very often results in requests to the CIP for major renovation projects. As a result of increased demands on the CIP for fiscal 23, there's a decrease in support for undertakings that will prolong the functional life of parks, playgrounds, and buildings. But on the other hand, funds for traffic calming and safety improvements on public ways have been increased, as have improvements for bicycle access. And the advisory committee has recommended, and we hope the town meeting will agree to increase the amount of funding for street trees, which is a needed step for climate change mitigation. And if you're looking for more information, check out the combined report starting on page 8-29 for descriptions of the individual projects.
Fantastic. Can I ask one of the two of you if you could spell out a little bit the question of sources of revenue and commercial development and residential development, how each helps in terms of being sources of development, sources of revenue.
Alok, you want to take that?
I'm gonna.
I just think a
punch
new
it to
person
you,
may
Carla.
want
Thank
to
you.
understand that.
The problem, as I see it, is that most of the revenue that is collected by a property tax is from residential properties. We have a very small commercial tax base, and consequently, although the commercial property owners may be taxed, that may be shifted in terms of the rate of taxes overall, it's residential properties that bear the burden. And if we were to see more residential or more commercial development, that would obviously help our situation, not just in terms of how much money residential properties pay, but probably more importantly, what other closing the deficit gap, but also being able to take on new projects for the improvement of the quality of life and the infrastructure in the town.
May I add one thing to that?
Yeah.
Which is that the town does have multiple sources of revenue, and some I think we could pursue in a better way. If we had perhaps a more comprehensive development plan for the town, we could actually plan that the business development, and then from that perspective, we could understand how we could grow our revenue base in a more methodical way. There are many initiatives right now, I think, that are being discussed that are focused on increasing revenue from the property tax base, the homeowner property tax base, one of which is the concept of the override, which we discussed. The other is the concept of a real estate sales tax. And I don't know the specifics of it, but there seem to be many other discussions that are out there. So I think having a comprehensive plan, I think, would help all of us understand how should we actually raise the revenue base in this town. Thank you.
Fantastic. Let us move on to, we're ahead of schedule. Cost of.
Can I add something
Yes.
then to that? So the one piece that you guys didn't touch on is which form of development puts the most demand on our town services. And this is another reason why the commercial is kind of more beneficial, because there are many types of development that doesn't require funding for school children, for instance. And the police and fire are less utilized by commercial than residential, I would say, as well. So it's common knowledge in town that the commercial pays additional beyond their use of services versus residential, which can sometimes require services that are beyond what they pay into the revenue pool.
Just to be clear, when residential tax has to stay under Prop 2.5, does commercial tax have to stay under Prop 2.5?
Yeah, I think they're both subject to it. I think, and just to follow up on what Linda said, that probably the best deal for Brookline would be light industrial development. But I don't think we have much left that's zoned for that.
The 2.5 isn't applied to each, it's just applied to the big number.
To the big number, right? Okay. Let's move to, thank you guys, to Warrant Article 9, Bernard Green, 1 minute on calculating the living wage.
You're muted, Bernard.
Can't hear
Still
you, Bernard.
muted.
We have to unmute Bernard. Paul, can you unmute Bernard?
No, I got it.
Yeah.
My computer gives me problems.
No, you're muted again. Ah, that might have been Paul. There you go. You're good.
No, okay.
It was not Paul, it's
Yeah,
Bernard.
it's issues with the computer. Okay, let me start now. This is pretty straightforward. So what I'm going to do is to sort of give people a sort of outline of the issues that they should be thinking about when looking at this warrant article. So with warrant article 9, the calculation of Brookline living wage, we're dealing with 3 wage rates: the Brookline living wage, the Brookline minimum wage, the state minimum wage. The warrant article is designed to ensure that Brookline's living wage under the town's bylaws, which is currently $14.09 an hour, is always $1 above the Brookline minimum wage, which is $1 more than the state minimum wage. The state minimum wage is now $14.25 per hour, so the Brookline minimum wage is now $15.25 per hour. If this article passes, the Brookline minimum wage will jump to $16.25 per hour. Let me note that in the combined reports, it's not clear on the state minimum wage. It states that the state minimum wage is $15 per hour as a result of the so-called grand bargain, but the state minimum wage will not rise to the maximum of $15 per hour until January 1st, 2023. Anyway, I hope that gives you sort of a general outline of the issue that you can then dig deeper into on your own.
Thank you, Bernard. Linda, warrant article 10, 4 minutes. Let me keep you to it.
Okay, warrant article 10 provides $188,644 to the Department of Planning and Community Development to support warrant article 26 from the fall 2021 town meeting. That warrant article called for an inclusive, community-driven comprehensive planning and zoning reform process. The first step of that process is for the select board to appoint a planning process study committee to define the scope, budget, timeframe, work products, and process for the new planning effort in Brookline. Warrant Article 26 passed by a near unanimous vote of the town meeting. Because the select board have not yet appointed the committee, language was added to this article to allow the planning director to use these funds for a geographic information system database expansion that is a necessary precursor to the broader planning effort. This budget allocation is revenue neutral because it reallocates funds that had been allotted to the planning department in 2018 for a project to clarify and reorganize our current zoning bylaw. The original project was meant to remove inconsistencies and make it easier to find and understand the many provisions in our circa 1965 zoning bylaw, which has been amended many, many times. The project proved unworkable, and the scope of the zoning bylaw effort was reduced to transferring the current bylaw, including all recent amendments, to an online updatable format. There was a logical consistency in reallocating monies used for zoning to a more broad zoning reform effort. The select board and advisory committee are unanimously recommending favorable action on warrant article 10.
Okay. Thank you, Linda. Alok, can we talk about warrant article 11, cost of living for retirees and any long-term?
Yes, please. Thank you, Kate. Warrant article 11 is filed by the retirement board, and it seeks to increase the base amount used to calculate the cost of living increase that is given to retirees each year. If you vote yes for this warrant article, you will be voting to increase the amount that is used to calculate COLA for retirees. If you vote no, it will leave the base amount where it is. The advisory committee voted unanimously 21-0 with one abstention for favorable action on this warrant article. And there were four major considerations that were discussed. One is that inflation, which is now returning to our economy, is disproportionately affecting those on fixed incomes. And this increase won't materially affect the timeline that we're on to fully fund our retirement obligations. The third point that was discussed quite a bit is that the money that we would spend to increase the base for COLA is dollars that may not be available for other purposes. This is, again, referring back to that structural deficit. That would be the one reason to not vote for this. On the other hand, it was noted that if we do not increase COLA and help our retirees out that are on fixed income, that may send a negative message to current and future employees. And we're already in a situation where we're having difficulty hiring and retaining the employees in Brookline. Thank you.
Thank you. So I know at some point there was concern about this warrant article, or some concern expressed at the select board. Maybe, I don't know if Bernard has anything to say about that, but if not.
John Van Scoyoc was concerned about the cost that would be involved. And the rest of the select board did not think that that was a factor. It's important to support, our retirees. And I think it's also important to note that unlike Social Security and many pensions in other states, the COLA in Massachusetts is not calculated against your retirement income, but rather the base that they have selected, which is $12,000. So you get a COLA increase on that amount, not on the rest of your retirement. That may not be relevant to our consideration, but it is a fact that I think should be considered, given that we're talking about the cost.
Thank you. So next up, we have warrant articles 12 and 13. David Pollock is going to present those, and those have used a lot of committee time. I think there's been a lot of committee change on those. So David, you have 12 minutes. Is that right?
Thank you. This is going to necessarily be a little different because everybody else has these great scripts, but advisory committee spent 2 hours last night discussing warrant article 12, and then I devoted most of my day to actually writing the report that's going to go to everybody in the supplemental reports, and I didn't spend any time formulating concise comments for all of you, but I will try my best. So I'm going to read just the executive summary in that report that's going on. Let me make one more comment about what you all should be doing, which is you should be waiting for the supplemental mailing, because warrant article 12 has been substantially rewritten, and the supplemental mailing will have the new rewritten warrant article. It will have a detailed memorandum from advisory committee and a detailed memorandum from the Committee on Town Organization and Structure. I don't know if it'll have a new explanation from the petitioners. It may be that the petitioner's explanation stands as it was written in the combined reports. So warrant article 12 amends the town's bylaw 3.14 relating to diversity, inclusion, and community relations to create a new quasi-judicial complaint committee and process for the town of Brookline to investigate discrimination complaints, make determinations of whether discriminatory acts were committed as alleged, and mete out penalties of up to $300 per day in fines. Warrant article 13 would apply these procedures to complaints of discrimination in violation of the town's fair housing bylaw. It's really administrative and cleans up some other parts of the overall bylaw, and really no one's talking about it, and it'll follow along with whatever happens with warrant article 12. So the background and history are really quite important here. 9 years ago, town meeting enacted the bylaw section 3.14, which created the Commission for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations, the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations, and the Chief Diversity Officer, who is a, kind of a cabinet level, a department head, staff director, who oversees that work. In terms of the office and commission have a diverse set of responsibilities, and there's a really great write-up in the budget book, in the FY23 budget book. If you go to the interactive version and you click down to the departmental sections, for any department, you can read what they're doing, what they want to do next year, all kinds of great stuff. So in terms of complaints of discrimination, the bylaw that was passed in 2013 says that they will address complaints of discrimination, quote, without investigating or making determinations of fact or drawing any legal conclusions. Now, in 2019, 6 years later, town meeting passed an amendment to this bylaw, striking that language without investigating, and instead substituting the language, the commission shall investigate the complaint by interviewing the complainant and any witnesses, prepare written findings, and recommend appropriate action to the select board, library trustees, or moderator as appropriate within 90 days of receipt of the complaint. So that was brought to town meeting, but it was brought with a lot of concerns, including from the CDICR, the commission, which wasn't unanimous in support of it. And there were referral motions which failed, to refer it to CDICR, to refer it to the moderators committee. And ultimately it was amended to have an 18-month implementation delay in order to basically fix what wasn't quite working in it. And it was passed into law. And it was worked on heavily by CDICR, which formed a study committee, met more than 30 times, studied how this is done in other communities, and came back to town meeting on the eve of when it was due, a year and a half later, and town meeting gave it another year. And now the language I just read and the changes that were made will become the bylaw on July 1st. But the CDICR group that developed Warrant Article 12 fulfilled their charge from town meeting and have come back with a new bylaw amendment that addresses how to more robustly address complaints of discrimination that would be brought to the town, and would then come to this under the bylaw. They always come to this office with creation of a new complaint committee. Both the advisory committee subcommittee, which met 5 times, and the committee on town organization and structure, which met a number of times, as well as town council, had many concerns about the language in the bylaw, about the specifics in the bylaw. There were concerns about legal exposure. Town council was concerned about many of the particulars. There were concerns about advocacy, which is part of the charge of CDICR, versus enforcement, which would be the role of this committee, and how it wasn't clearly separated. There were concerns about standing, who can file a complaint, about subpoena power, about the committee's structure and staffing, about cost, which is anticipated to be significant, and about a lack of clarity. So a group of members of the CTO&S, the Committee for Town Organization and Structure, rolled up their sleeves with the petitioners, with the help of town council, and have done some really exemplary work, making a lot of revisions with a goal to unifying their view of what this warrant article should look like. And they have done that in in virtually every one of these concerns, they have come forward with a single draft with lots of revisions that you will see in the supplemental mailing, and it's available online already, with one exception, which is the petitioners feel that the ability to levy fines is important. In their words, it gives the committee teeth to basically deal with complaints of diversity, whereas the group from the Committee on Town Organization and Structure feel that the concerns expressed by town council are significant enough about the legality and the extent and the fairness of the fining capability, and that it would put the town at risk of a lot of lawsuits, and they'd like to keep it out. So, the next thing that is complicated that everybody needs to understand is that because there hasn't been implementation of what was changed, right now, the chief diversity officer still is responsible for dealing with complaints and primarily refers them, or first tries to resolve them, to mediate, to bring people together, to find common ground. Maybe there's apologies, and to resolve them that way. And then otherwise just refers complaints to the state commission that does this, and the human resources in the town, our police department, to a lot of other bodies. And that is going to be over on July 1st, because what happens on July 1st is now the commission has to do this work, but without clear direction. Warrant Article 12 creates a new committee that gives clear direction. So you can't vote for the status quo. It's going to be, if Warrant Article 12 passes, then it'll get implemented. If it fails, what was passed in 2019 will get implemented, although it won't get implemented quickly. So, and that's important, because in the discussion last night of advisory committee, to summarize it, a majority of advisory committee lauded the changes, and there was a vote to prefer the version without fines, but ultimately voted a recommendation of no action. And the recommendation from advisory committee by a vote of 13-2 with 6 abstentions is for no action on Warrant Article 12, with the sense that there's got to be a better way to do this, and that can just be resolved and brought forward in November. So why did advisory reject Warrant Article 12? And I think there are a lot of reasons, but the main reason is that I think 2. The biggest is that this would be a group of volunteers taking on a very complicated area of law, and that it is generally done by professionals. And I think a lack of confidence that that's a good idea at all, and combined with sort of a view that it is redundant with processes that are currently in place and available with other recourse. Now, what the petitioners, I think, say, I don't want to speak for them, but their opinion strongly is that justice isn't being served without a local solution. And that's why they're putting forward this local quasi-judicial committee, because they feel that for a number of reasons, including timeliness, that the needs of people who feel that they've been discriminated against aren't being heard and aren't being met in Brookline. So I'll stop there.
Can I just want to ask you a question just for follow-up, but at first I just want to say that both Harry Bors and Ian Rothman have come in, and they were in another meeting. Has your guys' meeting ended, or have you come here just to?
It ended.
Okay.
We snuck out the back door. It's ended.
Okay, great, terrific. So my question for David is just, I know that once we get to town meeting, we are going to hear that something important is happening at in July with the default. And can you just explain how AC thought about the fact that we won't be able to act again until November and something's happening in July? Can you just speak to how AC saw that issue?
Yes, so practically speaking, the Chief Diversity Officer, the department head, Lloyd Gelano, has been doing this function. And he, has said he'll just continue to do the function. And discrimination complaints in the past have been running about 5 a year. That he gets a lot of complaints, but he gets 20 a year about accessibility, ADA issues and things. So they're about 5 a year, which isn't to say that's a small number. That's a separate thing. I mean, it's still significant. And he will just continue to do that. The commission would then have if it fails, the commission would have the responsibility to start doing these investigations, and they would just need to ramp up and figure out how they were going to do that. But the petitioners, in speaking with the AC subcommittee, suggested that if Warrant Article 12 passes, it may be as long as a year before they actually have the committee in place and open for business. So I think AC members felt like no matter what, it's not going to be available. The new solution won't be there on July 1st.
Okay, terrific. And the other question was the comparison to state processes.
I'll let a lawyer take that on. I'm an architect. Ian,
Susan.
I mean, Ian and Ian was one of the
Susan.
people that was working with the petitioners on this revision.
Yes, okay. Does either Susan or Ian want to, Susan, can you say something?
Sure. This follows very closely to what the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination does, except that it does it in a much more limited local way. And of course, at the MCAD, they have a whole staff of hired professionals who do nothing else but this. But it goes through an initial stage where someone determines whether the claim of discrimination actually alleges discrimination under the law, under state law as it currently exists. And if so, then there's a brief period of investigation. And this committee would actually be given subpoena powers and would be able to send out interrogatories and do all of the discovery that is traditionally done. And then reach a finding. And then at that point, depending on the finding, each either the complainant or the respondent would have the opportunity to appeal the final decision. And then it could go from there, depending on what happens. But this would obviously take a certain amount of time. And it was estimated that the Office of Diversity would actually need to hire 2 new staff people to assist in this process. And town council would also need to hire an outside counsel to develop the rules of procedure under which all of this would be done, so that it would be meet all of the legal standards that we would be held to, so that it would be done fairly and the rights of both parties would be respected.
Okay, great. Thank you. I am going to, without consulting with anyone, I'm going to call an audible here and let both Harry Bors and Ian Rothman present on their warrant articles, even though that's out of order, again, because they're coming out of another meeting. And so just for those following along at home, I am skipping just temporarily ahead to warrant article 26. And Harry Bors, you have 7 minutes on this, and I'm timing. And at the beginning, what you missed my saying was that I'm applying a Sandy Gatsby timer to this, okay?
Okay, that's fine. 26, there's a lot to unpack. Let me start my timer and we'll be on the same page. Okay, so Article 26 raises important priorities as well as structural concerns. So the petitioner brings the article forward as a way to provide opportunities and scholarship support in the town's recreation programming for less advantaged families, presenting it thoughtfully, and she's presenting it forcefully and presenting some pretty darn good ideas. Now, this is not presented as a policy for the Park and Recreation Commission, however, but rather as a structural bylaw change. And specifically, the petitioner seeks to amend the current town bylaw with a series of detailed, focused changes and requirements. And among those are annual 5-year comprehensive plans, annual youth engagement assessment, annual recommendations to increase participation by low-income families, to devise new program and seek funding to address under-engagement, financial aid for up to 100% for low-income families, require commissioners to actively engage in fundraising. I will say that's somewhat of a contentious issue for any board or commission, actually. The Recreation Department does provide tuition assistance for its programs within the limited constraints of the revolving fund. And being a revolving fund, it means it is self-supporting and doesn't pull funds from the town's general budget. So programs, therefore, can only succeed if there are tuition-paying participants. And tuition assistance is also funded from these tuition payments, which limits availability. The Recreation Department provides assistance based on family income, and it ranges on average between 30 to 35% of the cost of tuition. In FY18, which are pre-pandemic figures, 229 scholarships were awarded. No one who asked was denied a scholarship. However, that doesn't tell us how much of a financial strain was still left or how many people didn't request support at all. The expenses are somewhat augmented with grant funds from the Brookline Community Foundation for the summer camp program, and the town is currently in discussions about providing fairly substantial ARPA funds to help with this as well. There's more to come on that. It's probably fair to assume that many families are unaware of the possibilities for assistance, and for some, it still may not be within the reach of a family, even with that limited assistance. We can't know all of the factors. We do know that there are opportunities for greater outreach, and there's much more remaining need to be served. So in addition to casting a light on what is an important issue, the article also demonstrates the complexity of formulating immediate solutions to problems that may still require some defining. So accommodating more programs, more people, and offering assistance of up to 100% creates a number of obvious challenges, not the least of which is where does the money come from? And costs, of course, are driven by more numerous factors. There are as well capacity issues that limit participation. So for example, the summer camp is limited to 300 participants because of space and facility constraints. So if one were to add, say, another 200 participants, additional facilities and staff would be needed, and that would likely require the support of the school committee and the school department in part in order to accomplish that and provide it. Neither is contemplated in the proposed bylaw, by the way. And we know how scarce space is generally in Brookline. So one can easily imagine a situation where there are more applicants than slots. And given that sort of constraint, a model would have to be made for set-aside slots, first come, first serve, scaling within different programs, whatever the approach may be, but it would need to be carefully devised. Of course, the how in all of this does not have to be solved in the bylaw itself. The commission and staff can work on it. So for town meeting, this is probably going to come down to an issue of policy versus bylaw. The petitioner contends that a policy says, we would like you to, whereas a bylaw says, you have to. Certainly draws a stark distinction, though policies can and do work very well also, allowing a measure of flexibility and the ability to accommodate for unforeseen circumstances. The fire department has a long-standing policy of 4 and 4, meaning 4 firefighters on site in 4 minutes. It's a policy. It's not in the bylaw, but it's taken very seriously. The town's free cash policy provides an orderly waterfall of distribution, ensuring funds are regularly directed towards such things as the Affordable Housing Trust. This proposed bylaw change is very specific and focused, addressing on a very important constituency. However, the change would also bring primacy within the bylaw relative to other potential constituencies. And so we must ask ourselves, Is primacy essential or even advisable? Should we inscribe the needs of seniors specifically into the bylaw? What about the visually or physically impaired? The bylaw change also raises a larger concern as to the effect of bylaws more generally in setting overall town policies, priorities, and appropriations. Things with a cost that are etched into bylaw become budget issues, with the associated trade-offs and unforeseen hardships elsewhere. So a question of parity then naturally rises, because changing bylaws can intentionally or unintentionally risk rearranging the priorities for a whole community, not merely within the ambit of the Recreation Department. So the question before us largely will be, what is appropriate for a bylaw versus a policy? So in closing, the advisory committee is recommending that this be referred to the Park and Recreation Committee, and that it then come back and present a report to the fall town meeting. Believing referral will give a little more time for people to properly reflect on these objectives and how best to accomplish them. The petitioner believes that this will be an unnecessary slowing down of the process, and maintains we should not kick the can down the road in pursuit of perfection when so much is at stake. She prefers making a bylaw change now, seeing this as the best leverage. And I will just say as a PS, having been through all of the hearings and meetings for the AC, CTOS, and planning and regulation, Parks and Recreation, everyone is embracing these goals. Everybody sees them as important and wants to attain them. The Park and Recreation Commission has publicly stated that they are creating a task force, bringing in members from CDICR, Brookline Housing Authority, and others to pursue this. Everyone is on board. Where we're not sure yet is the best way to approach it, whether it needs to be a bylaw or whether we give time to the Park and Recreation Commission to come back and report to us with policies as they work on it.
Okay, excellent summary, Harry. I have one just clarifying question.
Yep.
For a new town meeting member, if I think this should be in a bylaw, I would vote yes on the petitioner's motion. If I think
Correct.
it should be in the policy, then how would I vote?
So in that case, the Park and Recreation Commission has been very clear that they feel that the role of the commission is to enact policies, and that people or groups come to the commission and say, we would like you to work on this, and then policies develop. So if you voted for a referral, what that would mean is that the Park and Recreation Commission would come back with their report to the fall town meeting. They would report on what progress had been made. And some of this is quite frankly sort of low hanging fruit that can be worked on right now. Some of these things are a bit more structural and harder to contend with, like long-term funding for these sort of things. And they may not have all of the answers then, but I think everyone will have a better sense. And if in town meetings wisdom, not enough movement has been made, we may see a proposal for a different sort of bylaw come back.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Harry. And thank you everyone for tolerating the schedule change. I am going to move to the next schedule change, again, out of respect for the time of the people who just popped out of the meeting for this. Ian Rothman on warrant article 33. So to anyone watching out there, skip ahead on your schedule to warrant article 33, 6 minutes to Ian Rothman. And Ian, I'm timing you.
Thanks, Kate, and especially thanks to everyone who's spending their Wednesday evening learning about all of the warrant articles. So Article 33 addresses one of the bylaws in the town's bylaws. It addresses section 2.1.9 of the town bylaws, which refers to the conduct of town meeting itself. And what the existing bylaw says is that the proceedings of town meeting are conducted in accordance with the Handbook of Parliamentary Law, a book called Town Meeting Time, which is published by the Massachusetts Moderators Association and dates back to, I believe, the 60s or early 70s. and the traditions in Brookline and these bylaws. That's what the existing section 2.1.9 says. Article 33 would amend that section to replace the phrase "the traditions in Brookline" with the phrase "the traditions in Brookline as codified in the town meeting handbook." The town meeting handbook is a book that has been developed over the years by the town moderator, and was originally intended as an educational guide. Some of you may have looked at it. It's available on the town website. A guide to how town meeting generally operates in the town of Brookline. The petitioner's explanation for Article 39 is that codifying the rules and procedures that are described in the town meeting handbook, they say will avoid argument about what constitutes a tradition in Brookline, and that the procedures therefore will be able to be debated and settled in town meeting. I should say also that Article 33 would officially approve the so-called published 2021 version of the town meeting handbook, or any other version, and it would require a vote of town meeting for the town meeting handbook to be revised. The revisions to the town meeting handbook in the past have been an informal process that the town moderator has done in collaboration or discussion with others. The effect of Article 33 in practical terms is likely to limit the ability of the town moderator to moderate the debate at a town meeting. There are a few provisions of state law that are implicated by this provision. So there is a provision of state law that says that the moderator shall preside and regulate the proceedings of town meeting, decide all questions of order, and make public declaration of all votes, and has certain other authorities. A state law that gives the moderator the power to preside over town meeting also gives a town meeting the ability to pass bylaws which regulate the proceedings at town meeting. And if town meeting does pass such a bylaw, that bylaw has to be approved by the Attorney General. In the past in Brookline, town meeting has in fact adopted and voted for bylaws which regulate the proceedings of town meeting, but they've only done so in situations where the bylaw addresses a very specific thing. So for example, we have a town bylaw 2.1.11, which says at the beginning of town meeting members who desire are given an opportunity to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. There's another bylaw that says that refers to who may be permitted to address town meeting, and so on and so forth. This would be the first example that we're aware of a bylaw that gives essentially broad brush authority to town meeting to approve or disapprove a wide swath of procedures which are described in the town meeting handbook and otherwise would be within the authority of the town moderator to decide. There is also a proposed amendment to Article 33, which may or may not be offered by the petitioners. And the proposed amendment attempts to provide even more structure over how town meeting may operate and govern itself. And the proposed amendment gives a hierarchy of different rules and guidance that exists in the world in terms of which pieces of a guidance and hierarchy have authority over others, which would further limit the authority of the town moderator to make decisions about how the debates at town meeting should be presided over. The last thing I'll say is that there have been certain court cases about the authority of the town moderator. And so there is a question as to whether Article 33 is or is not consistent with state law. There have been several judges which have held that the authority of a duly elected town moderator to preside over a town meeting, that authority is essentially not subject to judicial review, absent some evidence of bad faith or sort of abject improper conduct. So the decision for town meeting under Article 33 really will come down to one of whether the proceedings of regulating and moderating the proceedings of the debate at town meeting should be something that continues to be vested in the power of the town moderator, or whether a town meeting itself wants to wade into the particular procedures that the town moderator may use to preside over the debate.
Thank you. Excellent, Ian. And I am, because we pulled her in at the last minute, I'm calling my final audible, I promise. And that is that Janice Kahn is going to present warrant article 22.
Oh, no. Okay.
Not
No,
20.
no, she's presenting
27.
warrant article 27. which is the
27.
legal
I didn't
article.
mean 22. I meant
Oh, good.
27. Sorry, Janice. 27 on
Leaf
I
blowers.
do want to acknowledge that Janice was actually willing to do 22. I heard her say she'd do it,
Sorry.
but
She's going to
27 is
do,
what she's doing.
she's going to do warrant article 27 on leaf blowers, and then we will return to warrant article 14. And my apologies to other presenters. Janice, 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Kate. So a little bit of background. So I'm Janice Kahn. I'm a town meeting member in precinct 15 and also on the advisory committee. And I was part of an ad hoc subcommittee that was reviewing this article. However, this is not the first time I have been working on such articles. So a little bit of background for new town meeting members, that the regulation of leaf blowers in the town has been studied, debated, and laws enacted since 2008, when it was incorporated into the town's noise control bylaw, which is typical of other communities as well, that's where it has been regulated. In November 2011, town meeting voted to amend the general bylaws by adding a Part 8 public health and safety in Part 8, which deals with public health and safety issues, a new Article 8.31 leaf blowers to regulate the operation of leaf blowers in Brookline. In 2015, there was a desire to ban leaf blowers altogether. It was referred to a committee, a moderators committee. And in 2016, it came back to town meeting, which approved major changes in the leaf control bylaw, which among other changes allowed for a violation to be assessed not only on the person operating the equipment, but also the property owners as well. And it also passed a resolution to enable DPW to investigate and enforce leaf blower violations. So the petitioners have submitted this warrant article, which now seeks to ban gas-powered leaf blowers during the period of time when leaf blowers are allowed to be operated in Brookline. And that's in really very small windows, March to May, and then again in the fall. So, there are 4 objectives. One is to reduce the noise of leaf blowers. Ostensibly, gas-powered leaf blowers are noisier. It's to reduce carbon production to improve the environment, which is in line with other initiatives that we've had. It's to reduce the toxic exhaust of gas-powered devices and to improve compliance with leaf blower bylaws. The sense is that there has been very poor compliance with the current bylaw. So I will say that I don't know exactly what version that will be presented to town meeting in the vetting process, which I think is really a good process in this town, where petitioners come before several boards to discuss their articles, and it gets refined, changed, amended, changed by the petitioners along the way based on feedback that they get, and just it's a learning process, and it's so this has been changed. So I will tell you what the advisory committee voted. I'm not sure exactly what's going to be presented, but so what the changes that that the petitioners made to the current bylaw are in the definitions. They've added definitions, clarified what leaf blowers are to include leaf blowers on wheels, known as walk behinds, and they've now defined what a commercial operator is. So those are two non-controversial changes. They were going to change, right now the bylaw says that you can't have more than 2 leaf blowers on properties less than 75,000 square feet, 7,500 square feet. So that's a change, that's an error. But they wanted to move it to 20,000 square feet. So I don't know if that's gone back. That was approved by the petitioners to make that change back. They've added, okay.
Just be, no, I mean, if you want to close, finish up, yeah.
Yeah, so basically, the advisory committee, by a very narrow vote of 12 opposed to the warrant article that was voted, and 11 in favor and 3 abstentions, which is really basically no recommendation, are saying no to the article. The one point I want to make is that what the ad hoc committee tried to do was to change the date at which it would go into effect. The petitioners have it for 2024. We wanted to push it off to 2027. I will say that of the 2 communities that have passed these restrictions banning gas leaf blowers, Arlington and Lexington, none of them have banned it in 2024. They've banned it in 2025 and 2026.
Janice, thank you so much. Let's go back to Linda Pelkey, warrant article 14. And I want people to know that warrant article 15 is not being moved. And Linda is going to present warrant article 14 in 3 minutes and 16 in 2 minutes. So I'm just going to set a 5-minute timer for you, Linda. Okay.
Oh, so I should just go one to the other?
You got it.
Okay.
I'll wave to you when you've hit 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
Warrant article 14.
14. Warrant article 14 was brought by the planning department, and it amends the special permit section of the zoning bylaw to give the town explicit authority to impose certain construction mitigation requirements on any builder seeking a special permit. Most larger projects and many small ones require a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Special permits can grant waivers of certain bylaw requirements such as setbacks, open space, parking, etc. This warrant article is in large part an outgrowth of problematic conditions in and around Chestnut Hill Realty's large 40B project at Hancock Village. There's been considerable blasting to remove rock outcroppings, disruptions of water service, and generally unsafe conditions for residents due to the fact that residents are living in apartments on site while the construction's ongoing. Despite many complaints to the building department about these conditions, the town had little authority and capacity to manage these impacts. This bylaw amendment allows the Zoning Board of Appeals to impose construction performance standards, like limiting the number and route of trucks. It allows them to require frequent communication and information updates to surrounding residents. It allows them to make conditions to provide a construction website and post on-site contact information. More significantly, the Zoning Board of Appeals can require a builder to hire, at their own expense, a third-party construction liaison. The advisory subcommittee added the authority to impose requirements related to safe pedestrian and bicycle passage near construction sites. And a recent amendment from Precinct 16 town meeting members has been filed to require the appointment of a community liaison who will work with the construction liaison to hold monthly neighborhood meetings and to provide frequent project status updates, as has been submitted. The select board has voted favorable action on both of those amendments and warrant article 14. And the advisory committee has not weighed in on that amendment, but has strongly supported the original warrant article to allow construction conditions to be placed on special permits.
And Linda, just quickly before you move to warrant article 16, this is a zoning bylaw amendment.
Correct, and it
And-
takes a 2/3 vote to pass town meeting because
Right,
it is zoning.
Yeah, most things we do is by majority, but certain procedural things and zoning takes a 2/3 vote. Thank you. And warrant article 16, Linda?
Yes, warrant article 16 is also brought by the planning department and is a zoning bylaw amendment as well. And what this warrant article is really about is keeping active uses on the first floor of multi-story buildings in our commercial districts. First floor active uses contribute to street vitality, walkable access to goods and services for nearby residents, and strong economic activity. The town has limited amounts of land zoned for business uses. When a multifamily residential building is proposed for a site that is designated for business use, our zoning bylaw contains currently a provision that says that the first floor can only have 40% of the width of the facade dedicated to residential uses and related uses to residential, and that 60% of that facade frontage must be dedicated to non-residential uses, such as services, retail businesses, or restaurants. So think about the first floor. If you have apartments above, you're going to need an entryway and mailboxes, but we're trying to limit the width of that so that there's remaining space for commercial uses on the other 60%. This was already on the books. However, because the current bylaw did not say anything about how deep that space needed to be, the planning department saw several proposals that basically circumvented the bylaw's intent by proposing narrow, unusable spaces along 60% of the frontage. In one instance, the proponent suggested a space that was 9 feet deep, calling it an art gallery and leaving it empty. By requiring a minimum of 15 feet depth, this zoning bylaw amendment, Article 16, seeks to prevent this type of unusable space, thus closing an existing loophole in our bylaw. During the review process, there was a great deal of discussion about whether or not 15 feet was the right depth, whether or not we might want to be more specific about the types of uses we want to see in those spaces, whether or not we should require a minimum square footage of non-residential space, and how to make more nuanced calculations based on the overall size of the building. However, because these types of changes would be outside the scope of the warrant article, it was widely agreed that this 15-foot depth requirement was a step in the right direction and that passing the article would help plug this loophole in our bylaw.
Thank you, Linda, for that summary of warrant article 16. Carlos is going to speak to warrant article 17 and 18, 2 minutes for warrant article 17 and 4 for 18. And Carlos, I'm also going to just set a 6-minute timer for you, but I'll give you a T after 2, okay?
Okay, thank you, Kate. So Article 17 is a result of a town meeting vote of Article 25 in the last fall of 21 town meeting, where there was a bylaw or warrant article that wanted to increase the number of EV charging spaces, EV ready charging spaces in residential buildings. That passed, that was referred to the planning department, and the planning department has now come back with Article 17. Article 17 basically for multifamily and 3-family projects, it adds, it goes from 15% EV to which is what it's presently at, to 100%. So that means that all parking spaces in multifamily and 3-family projects would have to be EV ready. And in 1-family or 2-family homes, there would have to be 1 EV ready space per dwelling. It also changes the the bylaw, the existing bylaw, so that commercial parking spaces that have seven or more parking spaces will have to be 15% of those would have to be EV ready. It adds so new projects or extensive renovation, which applies to these to this bylaw, would comply with this requirement through either prescriptive means or performance means. Prescriptive pretty much means that you have a bylaw that, you have a set of rules that are set up by the building or by the bylaw or by the building code. Performance means that you can provide, if you can demonstrate that something is going to provide those requirements, then you can go ahead with that. And the performance allows for the ALMS, which is the automatic load management system. And that will allow for software to sort of distribute the EV charging throughout all the other spaces. So that's for 17. The advisory committee just amended one item, which is that if the Attorney General decides that for example, the AMLS system is not appropriate, that the whole warrant article is null and void. Otherwise, we would end up having 100% requirement with no way to provide that. For more information, I would urge you to read the combined report, because there's a lot of technical issues with it. Now, next one was 18.
Zoning, bicycle parking zoning bylaw, Isha.
Yes. So 18 is again brought by the Planning and Community Development Department. And what it does is it increases the requirement for bicycle parking, overnight bicycle parking, to 1.1 or 0.5%. And the way it does it is if it's a multiple dwelling, 8 units or above, the project would need to have 1.1 spaces per dwelling. If it's a project that is 100% of the units are affordable, as defined on the section 4.0 of the bylaw, then 0.5 spaces would be needed by unit for each unit. Age-restricted dwellings would also be 0.5 dwelling per unit. So the idea for this bylaw change is to increase the number of projects that have overnight parking, secured overnight parking inside the building for its residents, instead of, for example, more vehicle parking. And the Department of Planning and Community Development worked with several members of the community, and also mentioned that a lot of developers are doing this already on their own, because it makes sense marketing wise to do so. So again, with both of these articles, if we vote no, then they would the existing bylaws would remain as they are. If we vote yes, they would be changed to, in the EV option, it would be changed to 100% for residential, and in the bicycle parking, it would change to 1.1 and 0.5.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
the
you so
overview.
much, Carlos. Perfect. The alarm's just going off. It's absolutely perfect. Thank you, Carlos. And now, and thank you for waiting, Carla. Turf. Warrant articles 23 and 24. And we have allocated 8 minutes for that because it's been fairly
Hey,
complex.
Kate, sorry, was I doing 22 or someone else?
Nope, 22 we did. Thank you, Carlos. Janice did it. Am I
No.
wrong about that? Oh, no, you're right.
Janice
Sorry,
did 27, yep.
you're right.
Carlos
3
did-
minutes. You're right. Sorry, 3 minutes on 22. Thank you, Carlos. Messed that up.
Yes, so 22 is restrict. It's a bylaw that would restrict the sales of items with PFAS, which are let's see, they're considered forever chemicals, and so that means that they never, once you ingest them, they never leave your body, and they're applied either for bulk packaging, fabric treatment, fluorinated fibercarbons, and they would be restricted to be sold from being sold at home. And I'm sorry, I lost my notes. Yes, for over-the-counter cosmetic and personal care products, if the hydrocarbons were added. For foodware products, if the hydrocarbons also were added. For non-stick cookware and fabric treatments. The bylaw would exclude products sold in service businesses such as restaurants, medical offices, and hair and nail salons, as well as prescription products, and it would go into effect on July 2023. What was difficult about this bylaw is that it's actually very difficult to find out if PFAS are included in a lot of the ingredients of a lot of the products, because they're not always labeled as an ingredient. So the advisory committee recommended that a committee be established to consider how best to implement the goal of this warrant article by agreeing to refer the matter to a moderators committee, which would have a preliminary report by 2020, the fall 2022, and a final report and a possible warrant article by 2023 annual meeting.
Okay, and Carlos, the petitioner is still moving the article?
I believe they are, yes. So the advisory committee basically says we need to think about this a little bit more, and we refer to a moderators committee, which is often done when something has to be studied for further, and the petitioners, which have all rights to go ahead and say no, it's ready for prime time, and go ahead and vote on it. So again, I think if you read on the all the information that there is on the combined reports, you'll find it very useful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Okay, Carlos, sorry.
All
8
right.
minutes, warrant articles 23 and 24, turf, big issues in this town.
Got it. Thank you. So both articles 23 and 24 address the question of whether Brookline should continue to use artificial turf on its playing fields. And I'm going to go backwards and start with Article 24. Article 24 proposes a moratorium on the installation of any new artificial turf field for 3 years. And after that would allow installation only if the materials used in manufacturing the artificial turf are tested and certified to be free of organic fluorine. Regarding the replacement of existing artificial turf, replacement is permissible if the work takes place before June 1st, 2030, thereby allowing new artificial turf to replace the existing artificial turf at Skyline Park and the Sewell Recreation Area. After that time, replacement of artificial turf must also be tested and certified to be organic fluorine-free. Concern about artificial turf falls into 3 broad categories. First is the evolving research regarding the toxicity of synthetic chemicals, including PFAS, which Carlos just mentioned, used in artificial turf surfaces, and the health risks that these chemicals can pose. Second, the heat islands resulting from artificial turf being exposed to sunlight contribute to global warming, as do the gas emissions associated with artificial turf's production. Related to the heat are the high temperatures created at the surface of these artificial coverings, subjecting users to possible dehydration and heat exhaustion, especially in the summer months. And then finally, there's the problem of disposing of artificial turf once it's no longer usable. There are currently few, if any, ways for it to be recycled or repurposed. Those opposed to the moratorium and in support of continuing the use of artificial turf note the following. There's a scarcity of playing fields in Brookline that leads to the overuse of grass fields, and that overuse results in the poor playing conditions of those grass fields. Grass fields are closed during and immediately following rainy weather. Their use during the shoulder seasons of early spring and late fall is limited, if not prohibited. And regardless of maintenance efforts, grass is unable to withstand constant use, leading to the need for grass fields to be rested. Opponents of Article 24 also point to the very real need for people and children in particular to have access to outdoor recreational activities, exercise, and social interaction with their peers through informal and formal athletic opportunities. So now on to Article 23. Recognizing that any decision regarding artificial turf versus grass, real grass turf, must involve multiple trade-offs. Article 23 calls for a task force to be formed with members representing a wide range of expertise and experience, including recreation, turf maintenance, climate change, public health, risk assessment, and the physical, social, and emotional development of children. This group would be tasked with identifying the various issues and considerations. Just lost my place. Various issues and considerations that must be considered in developing a policy that attempts to strike a balance between the conflicting goals expressed by the parties on each side of this debate. The task force's report would be due by November 4th in order to provide an opportunity to possibly change directions with regard to the new field at the Driscoll School, if warranted by the task force's findings. That field has been designed and budgeted to be an artificial turf field. There's a ton of reading and source material on all of these issues, and recommended reading can be found, or links to recommended reading can be found on page 23-13 of the combined reports. And that's my report.
Thank you, fantastic. And we have next up, and so I'm sorry, can I just ask you, Carla, one other thing? Who appoints the committee, the study committee?
Initially, the petitioner for the article wanted the Park and Recreation Commission to appoint the committee, and the advisory amended that motion to have the select board appointing that committee in consultation with the Park and Recreation Commission and the Advisory Council on Public Health. Right. And yesterday, the petitioner agreed to support that motion. So there is going to be one motion, much to the delight of the moderator. There's only going to be one motion under Article 23.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Bernard, are we still, do we still have you here, Bernard?
Yep.
Thank you. Single-use plastic.
Okay, let's get going.
3 minutes, Bernard, and I'm going to set a timer. Thank you.
How many minutes?
3 minutes.
Oh,
Single-use plastic. Warrant Article 25. Thank you.
So Warrant Article 25 seeks to ban single-use plastics due to their negative impacts on the environment and problems they create in solid waste systems, sewage systems, and other systems. They also can get into the food chain and eventually into humans, either through foods or even the air. Warrant Article 25 is a type of article that has support of many people in the abstract, but that has implications in concrete situations. The town's Advisory Council on Public Health voted no action on Warrant Article 25, while acknowledging the health and environmental problems these products cause. They noted concerns, for example, about the scope of the article and the burdens it would place on the staff of the Health and Human Services Department, and being an effect, an unfunded mandate, its impact on products and retailers, its impact on lower income residents who may have less opportunities to substitute higher priced items for banned plastic items, and the impact of the ban on plastic floss picks that some people felt helped to improve dental hygiene by making flossing easier. So that's the Advisory Council on Public Health. Another important party with an interest in this is the Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerce raised additional concerns about the impacts on Brookline businesses following the devastation of the pandemic, supply chain problems, and hiring challenges. So another warrant article where different interests have to be balanced. And in town meeting, you're gonna have to figure out what is the balance that meets or is consistent with your values and what you think is best for the town. The advisory committee voted to remove references to microbeads, single-use floss picks, and plastic wet wipes, and voted as amended favorable action. The select board also voted favorable action on the article as amended by the advisory committee. So this is a very complex topic, and I urge new members of town meeting to read the reports, especially the report of the Advisory Council on Public Health at pages 25-4 in your combined reports for important public health related background information. So thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. And I want to let people know that Articles 15, 19, 20, and 21 are not being moved, meaning don't study them. They are not going to be a part of town meeting. That's 15, 19, 20, and 21. Now, Bernard just talked to us about 25. Harry Boers already spoke to us about 26 and 27. So I am now speaking about warrant articles 28 and 29. Briefly, I'm setting a timer for myself. Warrant Article 28 is a home rule petition on allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in local elections, and Warrant Article 29 is the same kind of petition on allowing permanent residents in the United States, what we just call green card holders, to vote in town elections. We need, as a town, the state legislature's permission to extend these voting rights in town elections to residents of our town. Town meeting has already voted on each of these 16, 17-year-olds and permanent residents. Before, we asked the state legislature to grant us the home rule petition, which it did not do. These are renewals of those asks, which have expired. It's unlikely the state legislature will act on these because they aren't unique to Brookline, which would be an ordinary feature of a home rule petition. Warrant Article 28, extending local voting to 16 and 17 years old, is a part of a national advocacy movement to increase voter participation in local elections. There are certain reasons why getting students before they turn 18 and leave home to become voters develops a voting habit. But as with this petition, this movement has been advanced by adults, not primarily by the class of those seeking to vote, which makes it unique among voter expansion claims. Now, my editorial, not the views of BBD, the legal status of adolescence is one of my research specialties professionally. I've published about the risks of Vote 16 to other legal protections that we afford to minors in other legal spheres, risks that absolutely played out badly for youth in law when the voting age was lowered from 21 to 18 in 1972. That led directly to reduction in economic support for that age group and protections in the criminal justice system that they used to enjoy. And I've described risk to teenagers from becoming accessible to political campaigns And I will probably be sharing my most recent publication on that with the TMMA at some point, but it won't make any difference. And I would next turn it over to Susan Granoff. 6 minutes to discuss the Kent Street parking affordable housing.
Thank you, Kate. And I believe I'm doing that along with
Along with
Bernard.
Bernard, yes.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to be starting off. Warrant Article 30 is a resolution to eliminate the parking requirement at the Kent Station Street Senior Affordable Housing Development. This is a follow-up to a warrant article that was passed in November 2016 by town meeting. The 2016 warrant article was a resolution asking the town to pursue the development of affordable housing for seniors using air rights over the town-owned 39-space parking lot on Kent and Station Streets in Brookline Village. This was an idea that had been utilized by a number of municipalities in California, and the original petitioner thought that this was worth studying and pursuing in Brookline. A committee was formed, which determined that, in their opinion, air right development was not practicable. And so instead, it issued an RFP, a request for proposals, for the development to incorporate the parking that existed on the surface, to have that parking go underground and within the structure. The selected developer presented a high quality but costly proposal for 54 units and 9 parking spaces, plus the original 39 public parking spaces. But it would cost the town approximately $12.1 million in subsidies to cover the construction costs that we would be obligated to pay for, as well as other related costs. The negotiation committee determined that these additional costs made the project too expensive for the town. And so they were on the verge of rejecting this proposal. The petitioners of Warrant Article 30 came up with a proposal, a resolution that would eliminate the requirement to maintain parking, which they believe would then reduce the cost of construction and thereby make this housing development for seniors more affordable. But they did not completely factor in the concerns of the surrounding businesses in the Brookline Village area. Many of those businesses utilize those parking slots for their employees. And there are other concerns related to this. As a result, a number of different variations of the petitioner's original warrant article were proposed. 2 of them were proposed by the petitioners. When you look at your combined reports, you'll see that there are 2 versions of the petitioner's warrant article. But as of last night, they have actually proposed a 3rd version. And Bernard is going to tell you about that. This version takes into account the concerns of the businesses that are located near this proposed senior housing construction project. Bernard.
Okay, thank you, Susan. I'm going to focus on the perspective of the business community, which is an important stakeholder potentially affected by Warrant Article 30. Their concerns are that Kent Street and Station Street parking lot provides essential parking for employees of Brookline Village businesses. Their employees may not have easy access to public transportation or other means of getting to work, so accommodating their cars is necessary to the continuing viability of that area. The lot is also used by local residents for overnight parking. Because the cost of protecting the parking on the site would require a prohibitively high subsidy by the town, as Susan mentioned, we have a classic conflict between 2 important town needs. 1, affordable senior housing on the one hand, and 2, parking for employees of local businesses on the other. The petitioner's original article was voted but for favorable action by the town. I'm sorry. The petitioner's original article was taken up by the advisory committee's ad hoc subcommittee on warrant article 30. The subcommittee voted an amendment to the article that would have protected the parking. At the full advisory committee, the original article failed to receive favorable action with only 2 votes in favor. And the subcommittee's amendment also failed to receive favorable action by the advisory committee. Following those votes, and considering the likelihood that the petitioner's original article would also fail at town meeting, the petitioner was urged to agree to support a revised version of the subcommittee's amendment that would protect the parking. He agreed and represented that the co-petitioners would also agree. Members of HAB and EDAB, Housing Advisory Board and Economic Development Advisory Board, and others began discussions with representatives of the business community on how to address their needs. And a version of warrant article 30 was produced that will be included in one of the supplemental reports that you will receive before town meeting. This version was voted unanimously by the select board on May 17. It includes the following provisions: that the town pursue affordable senior housing in a manner that is cost efficient for the town, that the 39 existing parking spaces be maintained either on-site or off-site, that a parking study that identifies adequate sites for those spaces be prepared and made a condition to a new RFP, adequacy to be determined by the Transportation Board and EDAB after a hearing, not by the developer, and that the parking solution applied during construction as well as after construction. Finally, that only a limited number of metered parking spaces could be included in the plan. Todd Corain did not want to lose those metered parking spaces. If the original warrant article 30 is moved at town meeting and it fails, then the amended article, or if it fails, the original 2016 resolution requiring protection of the parking would apply. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask one quick question? If town meeting votes yes on the amendment and something changed, is it a kind of change that could apply if this housing no longer is affordable housing? If the type of housing changed with this parking agreement, this would disappear?
Well, it's unlikely that the type of housing would change because, the warrant article is very specific that, the public purpose is housing for senior citizens.
Great.
And affordable housing for senior citizens.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
I might add also that if the article passes as amended, but we cannot come up with a way of providing the parking at a cost that is not prohibitive to the town, we're going to have to start over at ground zero. So.
Okay, thank you. And where should people go to learn more?
Oh, but
because it's complicated.
That would be
reports.
the supplemental reports.
Okay, supplemental
Right.
report, combined reports.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am up next. 1 minute on 2 resolutions. So the first is Article 31. And this is here's something to just know. In November of 2022 on the ballot, there's going to be a statewide ballot question about whether to characterize Uber and Lyft drivers as independent contractors. So it's a statewide ballot question. Individual voters will vote on it. So this warrant article 31 asks town meeting to express a view against that. It's a resolution, so it doesn't have a legal impact, but it's a sense of town meeting. The town does get tax revenue from every ride initiated in the town. I believe, Susan, that has there's no consequences for the tax revenue to the town. But the labor issues are general labor questions tying into the trends of the gig economy. You may be familiar with them. This is expressive and nothing more. That's Article 31. Article 32 asked town meeting to resolve to disapprove of the US embargo of Cuba. And if you wonder whether we as a town body have jurisdiction over that, no. Influence over it, doubtful, but it's an important issue, not necessarily a local issue, and that's what that is. And then next up would be Ian Rothman for 33, but he's already presented, so it's back to me. And I have 5 minutes on these transparency warrant articles, one of which I'm the petitioner. I'm in a group of petitioners for. Okay, Articles 34 and Article 35. They can be viewed together. They're both non-binding resolutions about the transparency of what we do as town meeting members. So we put ourselves to the test in a non-binding resolution. Transparency in government processes is guaranteed by law almost everywhere in the United States. Town meeting is actually a rare exception to these rules, or town meeting members are. But for practical reasons, not because the risks of secrecy aren't here in the way we run town meeting. Even though transparency requirements can be very awkward, they allow the public to see that the grounds for governmental decisions are not either corrupt or irrational, and they allow any factual claims that influence decision makers to be answered. So Warrant Article 34, concurrent with going online as a town meeting due to COVID, a WhatsApp chat was organized in town meeting by some town meeting members. And in it were, and presumably still are, a substantial portion of the town meeting body, say maybe 50 to 70 people. It's easy to see how such a thing could get rolling, but also easy to see how it can develop into a non-transparent deliberation space for persuasion and argumentation that the public and other town meeting members can't see occurring during the formal town meeting deliberation. This warrant article doesn't address that kind of large scale side discussion if it occurs before town meeting itself, but it asks us not to have that kind of large scale side deliberation during the formal deliberation unless it is made simultaneously transparent to the public, like it's moved to a public facing online platform. It allows for this warrant article still allows for one-on-one and small group clarifications. And it explicitly, in the warrant article, relies on our own self-policing in defining the ideas of small group and clarifications. Arguments against this is that town meeting is not subject to the open meeting law. That argument assumes that we as a group should, drive a truck through that hole, or, should take this no holds bar approach to that special open meeting law accommodation we're granted. Actually, as a representative versus an open town meeting, state law does nudge us toward greater transparency than those open town meetings by, for example, making it harder for elected town meetings to conduct votes by secret ballot. So transparency elevated in the elected town meetings. WhatsApp is end-to-end encrypted. You'll never have a public record of what is moving the debate there. Other governmental bodies and other places are dealing with this relatively new problem. The DC City Council has prohibited the use of WhatsApp entirely. The British Parliament is debating the same issue. NGOs affiliated with the EU and Canada are working on these protocols. It's a new problem, but one transparency advocates are focusing on. There will be no adequate public record from town meeting if a substantial conversation is happening behind the closed door of a text thread during the meeting. While the open meeting law does not apply to individual town meeting members, this is important. State law does require that the town meeting itself be conducted in public. Okay, state law requires that town meeting be conducted in public. The meeting becomes a formality if important large-scale persuasive discussion is occurring among members during it, but not as a part of the public town meeting. So the spirit of the state law is violated. We also deprive the public of an important record of our proceedings. But this being a resolution is a soft touch approach to regulating this. Town meeting was presented with this issue last year, but it was presented in a difficult format as a rider to a home rule petition and that came late in the process. So this warrant article presents the issue in a cleaner way, more deliberately. This warrant article is consistent with the town meeting handbook, which seeks to restrict electronic device use to accessing the combined reports only. But town meeting choosing this would be more powerful, and itself would be, more than just appearing in the handbook. Warrant Article 35, the Town Meeting Members Association is a private organization, arguably, and almost all of what happens on it happens outside of the formal meeting. But for that which happens during the formal meeting, Warrant Article 34 would apply. For the rest, Warrant Article 35 simply asks, but does not require, the Town Meeting Members Association Board to make the listserv readable to the public. The whole town meeting membership has access to the listserv, and in the days leading up to town meetings, substantive deliberation about warrant articles happens there. Making that deliberation available to the public is like making town meeting available on cable access or big. Warrant Article 34 has more AC support than Warrant Article 35. Both have AC support, presumably because Warrant Article 34 is a smaller measure because it addresses only to what happens in the formal town meeting itself. But both warrant articles are designed to ensure that we as decision makers with authority over people's lives and property shine light on our own deliberations. And I believe that concludes our warrant review. Should we take questions? Because we finished under.
No, we're not taking, we have questions in the chat, Kate, and we have about 5 minutes left. So you did come in under the wire, but we're gonna, I think we're gonna wrap up because I can see some yawns and stuff.
2 hours.
All right, panelists. First, let me say thank you to all of the new town meeting members that have stuck it out for the full 2 hours. I think we pretty much have everybody that started out. Thank you so much. We hope that this was helpful. Wouldn't it be great if town meeting went this quickly? Alas, it will not be this quick. It will last many days. But thank you to everybody who was able to attend. Importantly, thank you to our panelists. I know that you guys have been doing this for months now, a couple of times a week. And I know that you're all in the throes of writing reports for the combined reports. But I just want to say thank you so much because your depth of knowledge and you're living this, each time you attend advisory and the subcommittee meetings. Thank you for all that you do, and thank you for your expertise in concise reports and recommendations to our new town meeting members. And a special thanks to Kate Sobaugh for her outstanding facilitation and keeping us on track. Yes, very well done. Claps all around. So this is being recorded and we will publish it on, I think, the Brookline by Design YouTube channel. We actually have such a thing. And also the questions that were raised in the chat, some of them were answered in real time, but we will consolidate all those and publish answers to each of those questions with the video. And we'll distribute that. And we'll probably distribute the video, I think, to the team of May, because I think even seasoned town meeting members would benefit from this rapid review of the warrant. So thank you so very much for joining and taking the time. I see that Carla has her hand up.
Just a quick comment. The deadline for the supplemental reports is tomorrow at noon, which means that town meeting members should be receiving additional information to the information that was in the combined reports. You should be receiving it on Monday. And if that's not enough, during town meeting, as amendments to warrant articles come in, last minute amendments, and are vetted by the select board and advisory committee, there won't be enough time for a mailing, but there will be time for a posting. So town meeting members should be aware that they may be getting last minute advisories on what's happened to these warrant articles.
That's right. Thanks for bringing it up, caller. So look for a mailing to hit your doorsteps on Monday, and then make sure you pay attention to the TMA listserv, because that's where those last minute reports come in from advisory. And I know that at the hour before town meeting, advisory meets, and they do make decisions, and they make some last minute changes right up to the moment of town meeting. So again, did you want to say something, Susan?
Yes, I just wanted to add that even though you may not receive the mailing until Monday, there will be a posting of the supplemental reports online. And so you could check them out there if you're eager to see them in advance.
That's a great point. Thank you so much, Susan. And with that, we are going to conclude 2 minutes early. Thank you so much. And this will conclude our rapid warrant review. Thanks so much.
See you all
And
Tuesday.
have a good evening.